Welcome, everybody, to Mom Street USA. My name is Jackie, aka Wishes Mama, and this is the first of many of my solo Mom Street USA podcasts. I am so excited for our new chapter and our new structure going into 2025. So, you're going to be hearing a lot more from me and also from some of our other new rotating co hosts. So, we're very excited to bring you guys this kind of Mom Street USA 2.0, Mom Street USA and Friends, with our hub episodes coming up. But before we get to that, today is a solo episode with just me, and I'm going to be doing a topic that we have been requested to do previously from our community, and that is traveling with extended family, and also kind of highlighting a few things about traveling with grandparents as well. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the last series that we did on Mom Street USA, which was talking about traveling with different ages, right? So we talked about infants, we talked about toddlers, school age, teenagers. So if you need more of that information, check out our last couple episodes that we did. But this one, we're going to talk about kind of extended families and grandparents. Because traveling in those large family groups is really how a lot of people get to experience Disney. So many people do these big family trips, especially if you're someone who maybe doesn't get to go every single year or every other year. Maybe it's once every 5 years, every 10 years. So many people experience the parks this way. But there's also kind of some things to consider maybe that you wouldn't have to consider if it was just your immediate family or you and a significant other or you and a kid. Um, there are a lot of things to consider, whether this is your first Disney trip or your 40th Disney trip. There are still a lot of things to consider when it comes to traveling in larger family groups. So I'm going to give a little bit of insight on that today. I am joined here as I record by my wonderful community on our TikTok Live, which is how I record these episodes still going forward. So you may hear me mention comments from my chat as I go. That is where that is coming from. But the first topic that I want to talk about is packing. Not too much to really talk about on packing because it really just depends on what ages you're going to be packing for. And we talked a lot about that with the younger kids. Grown-ups are so much easier to pack for, generally speaking, although a lot of us who frequent Disney, I feel like, are overpackers, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But the biggest thing I think that comes with packing and picking out clothes is, are you going to be someone with your extended family that wants to do the matching outfits? We see so many of them in the Disney parks. We see so many different versions of coordinating and Disney bounding and matching t-shirts, family t-shirts, so many different options for what you can do when it comes to that. So that is something that you do need to consider, right? Some people may be really good with like, yes, I want to do matching. We want to match every day. We want to have the same shirts. We want to do the coordinating colors, all of that. Other people may be like, nope, that's not me. I'm not the one, you may be traveling with people who this may be their one and only time going to Disney, and they're just kind of along for the ride, so to speak. And maybe Disney's not really their thing, but they're coming with the family and they won't wear anything Disney the whole trip. There's nothing wrong with that, right? To each their own. So we kind of, with my family, we tend to find maybe a middle ground when it comes to matching. We do a lot of like themed days for our outfits. And I've talked about this on Mom Street before, but we'll do something like maybe on the first day we go to Magic Kingdom, we'll do a Mickey and Minnie theme. So everybody, if it's my husband and I and our kids, we'll wear different variations of Mickey and Minnie to kind of coordinate and match, but we're not like wearing the exact same shirt. So we do a lot of that type of thing, which is a great option, especially if you've got a bigger group and maybe you have people that already have kind of a core base of Disney clothes. Because the worst thing is having to go on these family trips and you feel like you have to buy an entire new wardrobe just to match with your family. Like, no, we don't need to do that unless you really want to, right? Unless that's like what brings you joy and you have it in your budget. a lot of us don't have it in our budget to buy an entire new wardrobe for every vacation that we go on. So, doing those theme days can really help alleviate that to make sure that you still kind of feel like, oh, this is so fun. Like we're still coordinating and matching, but we don't have to wear the exact same clothes every day. The other thing is you really kind of, like I mentioned, have to go with the flow on this. Or what something that I did this year, because I'm getting ready to go on a trip with more of my extended family, is we purchased clothes for Christmas presents, which was super fun. My dad is not a Disney person. Totally fine. And I think the thing that he is looking forward to most on our trip is that he gets to go golfing. So we, for Christmas, bought him a really nice Mickey Mouse golf shirt. That way, it's something that he'll wear every day. He golfs constantly during the warm weather here in Ohio, so it's something he can wear for that, but then it's also something that he can wear when we go to the parks. So doing things like that are is a fun way to, like, show that you're thinking about people before your trip and kind of, cater maybe some of your wardrobe choices to that specific person. So that's something that is also a fun way to maybe also help other family members get excited about the trip, right? So that's always fun. Talking about planning ahead, something that we talked about with our previous episodes when we talked about kind of traveling with different age groups is talking about ordering stuff ahead to your resort. So this is something that is hugely helpful, especially if you're someone who's going to be buying diapers or wipes or things like that. You have the option to order ahead. There are so many different delivery services, and I'm not going to go into all the details of all of those, but being able to do that ahead of time can be immensely helpful. So, especially if you're flying, and we'll talk about flying and driving here in just a moment, but it gives you that added comfort that you know that it'll be there and you don't have to try to fit all of that in your suitcases, especially if you are someone who is a chronic overpacker and has multiple outfit options for every day. Also, then having to fit in things like diapers, wipes, extra supplies that you can order ahead instead it can be immensely helpful. So planning to group order groceries or planning on maybe a few members heading to the grocery store when you check in is a really great idea, especially if you're going to be, you're likely going to be across several different rooms if you are going with your extended family, whether it be two, three, four, five rooms, depending on how big your group is. Um, Kind of dividing and conquering the store run, but also like having joint lists of things that you know that, like, hey, it'd be helpful if we got like this giant box of these applesauces and we can split them between two of the rooms that have kids. Things like that can be really, really helpful. Things like baby wipes, diapers, other essentials that you can order, snacks that you can split between rooms. All of that can be really, really helpful. And it's kind of a nice benefit to going with your extended family because you don't you have kind of like a backup if you run out of things, right? If you're splitting food or you're splitting, diapers or whatever it may be, you kind of have that built-in backup of like, "Oh, hey, I'm running low. Can I grab one from you?" Or, "Hey, can you hang out with the kids while I run to the store to go grab more?" It gives you more hands to help with, and it gives you more rooms to kind of have the ability to make sure that you don't run out of your stock of those essential items. Um, Speaking of essential items, strollers. Again, we've talked about a lot of this with our Visiting with Different Age series that we did at the end of last year. But strollers are incredibly helpful. Kids pretty much 6 and under, I would highly suggest strollers for, unless you know for a fact that your 6-year-old can hang and will be fine all day. By day 3 or 4, they may not be fine anymore. So I highly suggest strollers. Um, Renting a stroller is an option. There are lots of rental companies down in the Florida, Orlando area that you can rent with. Do a quick Google search, get on that Facebook group and see who people recommend. But there are so many different groups that you can utilize that do stroller rentals that will often drop them off at your resort, um, which is a really, really big perk. I do want to mention that. Um, Disney's affiliate company is Scooter Bug, and they are the ones that they will allow, like, dropping off at and holding things at Bell Services. The other ones that you run into, Kingdom strollers or some of those other ones, you do have to meet them in person. So keep that in mind as you're kind of looking at some of those. The other thing while I'm talking about renting is thinking about renting ECVs. That can be enormously helpful if you've got people in your party that maybe uh, have some mobility concerns, or maybe they're you're not sure and they're not sure if they're gonna be able to last all day long. Renting an ECV can be a really great way to help them still enjoy the parks, even if they're concerned about walking, standing, long days in the parks, all of those types of things. So, keeping that in mind. Now, as far as strollers go, you are also welcome to bring your own. Your method of transportation down to the parks may determine whether or not you want to bring your own or rent one. Also, do keep in mind that the parks do offer stroller and ECV rentals, but they are first come, first serve. So those things are important to also keep in mind. If you're going during a really busy time of the year, the parks will run out. So keeping that in mind. And also the thing about that is if you're renting in the parks, those strollers and ECVs stay in that park. So transportation from the park to your car or from the bus to your resort room at the end of your day, those are all important things to remember because if you're renting in the parks, you won't have access to those once you leave the park. So I highly suggest renting from an outside company if renting is the way that you're going to go. And again, we talked a lot about strollers in our previous episodes. So if you want more information about that, keep that in mind. And yes, Vinny in my live chat here has a really good reminder that wagons are not allowed in the parks. So do keep that in mind as you are planning about your stroller. But with the strollers, coordinating between families and between kids can be really helpful. We're getting ready to go on a trip. We're gonna have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 9-month-old. So my 8-year-old, he doesn't really need a stroller. Maybe every once in a while he might want to take a quick break, but generally speaking, he doesn't need a stroller. My 6-year-old still needs that stroller access, and so does my 4-year-old niece. So we have a sit and stand stroller with the bench seat in the back and the normal kind of scoop seat in the front. And we plan to, for the 3 older kids, there's 2 seats in that stroller, and we're just gonna rotate. My son doesn't need a permanent seat in that, and if he does need a break, then we can hold one of the others or do a piggyback or stop to take a break if we need to with the kiddos that age. So kind of thinking about your stroller needs across your group so that you're not necessarily having as many strollers because it's a lot to coordinate, right? You're getting on in and out of buses, you're getting in even getting in and out of cars if you're driving or renting a car. It's a lot more to coordinate the more strollers you have. So kind of consolidating that down can be super helpful. Um, and but you always want to make sure that you have a good way to get back to the room for anyone who needs a midday nap or break. So that was something that we considered when we started talking about our stroller configuration and what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that my niece would still have access to a stroller to be able to go back in the middle of the day if she needs to. Let's say my kids are good to keep going. She wants to be able to go back. It was a conversation that my sister and I had of like, oh, yeah, we'll be fine. We'll be able to coordinate that. We'll be able to figure that out. If we're left strollerless, we'll be okay. If you take the stroller, there's lots of different things to consider with that. So having those conversations and knowing what your kiddos' needs are can be really, really important when it comes to strollers. And again, we went in depth about the types of strollers and what works best and all of that in our previous episode. So head back to those if you want more stroller information. The other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with strollers is park bags. You want to kind of plan ahead for, again, how you're going to pack those park bags. Depending on the ages of your kids, you may not need big backpacks for everybody, right? You may be able to designate like one or two specific bags that you kind of have like joint extra supplies in, that can stay in your strollers to help save people from having to carry stuff around. So you may be able to have one bag that has extra first aid stuff and ponchos and snacks in it, and that can stay in the stroller. And then maybe you have like, for example, when we go, my sister's gonna have a diaper bag for her 9-month-old. Well, her 4-year-old doesn't need the diaper bag anymore, so her stuff can go in our bag. There's ways to kind of divide and conquer that, like I talked about earlier with the snacks and everything, to make it just easier so that you're not carrying as much stuff when you go into the parks. Because getting through security is a thing that you're gonna have to consider, and folding up and down strollers if you're getting on and off buses or other transportation that you need to do so. Um, so keeping that in mind, but also keeping in mind that please do not leave valuables in your stroller. Things can and may get taken, get lost. Strollers get moved by cast members and things may fall out. So don't leave valuables in your stroller. Leave things that are replaceable in your stroller, but take your valuables with you when you leave. So I am a huge proponent of taking like a smaller lounge fly or a fanny pack or a shoulder bag that has your essentials in it that just stays on you, and then everything else can stay in the stroller. So when you have to park your stroller to go into the ride, you know that if anything happens to get misplaced, taken, stolen, whatever it may be out of your stroller, that you still have your essentials on you. You've got your IDs, you've got your park tickets, you've got your magic bands, whatever it may be. Um, that is something to keep in mind. And also a good point from our live audience here, so to speak. Duck is chiming in that Disney is very backpack friendly, and there are typically almost every ride that you can have them on, and that is exactly right. There are very few rides on Disney property that you have to take your backpack off. So if you prefer to take a full backpack, you can by all means if that's your preference. But I also think that especially if you're traveling in a larger group, consolidating some down, leaving some stuff in the strollers if you have them, that's another really helpful way to go as well. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what to do and what to kind of plan for before you get to the parks. But let's talk about actually getting to the parks, right? Because that is something that is a little trickier to coordinate when you have these big groups that you're traveling with. Um, so again, and I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but we talked about a lot of tips for traveling with infants in the plane or school age kids or whatever age group you may be going with. So if you need more specific flying like hacks and tips for your age group, go back a couple episodes, find your age group, listen to that part of that episode. But just a couple notes about kind of flying potentially in larger groups or trying to coordinate flights for these larger groups. Um, if you're able to coordinate them so that way you guys can fly together, it may be a little bit of extra work ahead of time, but it's definitely worth it. Especially if you've got littles that you're traveling with, having those extra sets of hands on your flight in the airport, getting your luggage after you land, all of those things that you kind of have to deal with, and kind of the chaos that comes with flying with kids is always going to be more helpful when you have an extra set of grown-up hands. Um, so again, those tips that we talked about previously, bringing new activities, snacks, tablets with headphones are all helpful things for kids on the flight. But also having an extra adult to entertain the kids is always helpful too, especially when they're younger. If they're infant or toddler and you're able to kind of maybe do a little musical chairs with them and pass them between the grown-ups, gives the grown-ups a break, gives mom and dad a break, and also helps the kiddo, have a kind of a change of environment to keep them more occupied. Hopefully, if they're little like that, you can get them to nap or at least, almost nap maybe on the plane. But if not, having those extra sets of hands is helpful. So if you're able to coordinate your flights, that's great. Getting to the parks from the airport can be a bit of a challenge with these bigger groups. There are several options that you can take from the airport. RIP Magical Express. We miss you, but because that is no longer an option, different options you do have are the Mears shuttle. Mears shuttle is basically like what the sort of like what the Magical Express used to be, but Mears does have several different options. They do have some more private transportation options as well in some of their smaller vans. So definitely, if that's something you want to do, take a look at their website to see what their options are. Rental cars are always a great option, and I do suggest having a rental car if it's within your budget, because I just think it's so helpful to have the ability to, one, get around to get supplies if you have to go off property. If you need to make a Walmart or a Target run, having a car is super helpful. Um, but also having a car if you've got littles that need to take that afternoon break, but maybe you've got some that want to stay so you can divide up throughout the day. Being able to have a car to get back to the resort quicker than your bus or other transportation maybe can be a really big benefit. There's always an Uber and a Lyft option depending on your party size. It may or may not be cost effective and efficient for you to go that way. Or it may be, the thing with the mirrors, if you do the standard mirrors option, you pay per person. But something like an Uber or a Lyft, you pay per car. So you may have to price out a couple options to see what makes the most sense. The other thing to consider is those car seats. So, looking into what you need to do for your particular aged kids when you're traveling, whether or not you brought your car seat on the plane with you, all of those different factors are things you need to look into. And just know that you may have to do a little bit more research when it comes to those bigger groups to see kind of what your options are to be able to, all kind of coordinate and go together with your luggage to your resort. There are also private companies that do transport from the airport as well. So again, lots of different options. It really just depends on your budget, how many of you there are, and kind of your time frame for how quickly you want to get to your resort. Now, let's talk about if you're driving. A little bit less to coordinate if you're driving. Um, and like I said earlier, having at least one car on property in these family groups can be hugely helpful. Grocery runs, driving to the parks, getting back for naps quicker, all that I just talked about with the rentals also applies if you drive, right? Now, I will just mention, I do not suggest trying to necessarily follow each other on the road. Go at your own pace, stop when you need to. Don't put pressure on yourself to always stick together. Give yourself time to get there. Stop if you need to. Don't stop if you don't need to. There's lots of different options when it comes to driving. So don't feel like you have to be stuck together when it comes to that. Because I know I've done the caravan before. Um, and unless you have two drivers that are very similar in driving style, it can be a little frustrating. So keep that in mind when you're planning your drive. That can be a major deciding factor. And again, with your driving, it can be a lot easier to just say, like, hey, we're all going to aim to get here around this time to check in. Leave when you need to leave, right? And that may depend on what you choose to do and when you choose to leave, and it may, where you're coming from. Lots of different variables when it comes to that. So, let's talk about resorts because I think this is a big factor when it comes to planning a trip with a bigger group. I'm going to kind of go through the different categories of the resorts at Disney World. I'm going to talk briefly about Disneyland. Again, you guys all know that Kate was typically our Disneyland person, but I do have a lot of Disneyland knowledge as well. So I'm going to do my best to share that with you guys too. And hopefully someday it will become firsthand knowledge when I get out to that park. But let's talk about some Disney World resort options. I am going to talk about the different categories. So, value category, if we're thinking about different options, in the value category, we have the All Stars, we have Pop Century, we have Art of Animation. These value resorts have your basic rooms, right? So, if you know that the people you're traveling with just need a basic standard hotel room, this is what I recommend. If you are not people that plan to spend a ton of time there, or you don't have huge preferences about where you want to stay, these rooms are great. They're all newly refurbed. They have very good amenities. The thing about a lot of these resorts is you can request adjoining rooms when you do your whenever you book, and also when you check in. So it's never a guarantee, but you can always request it. And doing like a personal check-in at the front desk can help with this request, if you're arriving earlier in the day. If you're getting in at like 8 p.m., going to the front desk to request adjoining rooms, probably not going to happen. But if you're arriving at like 11 a.m., you have a much higher chance, right, of being able to get to those um, adjoining rooms when it comes to that. There are some family suite options in these value categories. Art of Animation, of course, is a well-known resort for having those family suites. There are also family suites at All Star Music. Now, hear me out. I like the Art of Animation suites, but I 10 out of 10 times would prefer to stay at that All Star Music family suite. I think the layout of it is better. It feels more spacious. I just like the way that it's set up. The kitchen is a better space if you are someone who is going to be using the kitchen for even just breakfast or lunch or those types of things. Um, that for me makes a huge difference in the layout of all of that. So I highly suggest those All Star Music suites. They will sleep up to 6 comfortably. So keep that in mind. You can always find information on the Disney website if you're just kind of perusing and looking at different layouts and things like that. If you are traveling with a group this size, I do highly suggest you contact a travel agent. It's a lot to coordinate because you're going to have multiple different rooms that you're looking at booking. So I really suggest using a travel agent. So that's my 2 cents on that. Um, the value resorts do have in their building, they typically have a single centrally located elevator. So if you've got some mobility concerns in your group, that's something to keep in mind. And overall, these resorts are not too terribly large, but again, making the request of a room close to transportation for anyone in your party that may need it is always a good idea as well. So again, these requests can be made ahead of time, but I do also suggest going to the front desk when you get there just to check in and see and make sure that they've got your requests on file. That's my suggestion for any of these, no matter which type of resort you may be staying at. That's always my suggestion with that. So let's talk about moderate resorts at Walt Disney World. That would be the Port Orleans, French Quarter, and Riverside, Caribbean Beach, and Coronado Springs. Those are in this category for Disney World. These rooms mostly are still set up like your standard hotel room, but they've just got a little bit more floor space. So you're not going to feel a ton of difference when it comes to the layout and the beds and things like that, but you're gonna feel like you just have a little bit more room to kind of walk around in there, which is very helpful if you are someone who's got a stroller, who's got an ECV, who's got a pack and play or a crib that you're gonna have. Again, those requests for cribs and pack and plays can be made on your account ahead of time and at the front desk as well. So that's something to consider if it's within your budget. If you don't really need anything fancy and the monitor is within your budget and you know that you're going to need it for those extra things you're going to have in your room, I highly suggest doing that. Again, you can request those adjoining rooms, but it's not guaranteed. Um, A few of these resorts have a little bit of a different makeup. A lot of them, or I should say all of them, still have your standard room options. Caribbean Beach does have a fifth sleeper room. So if you've got one family that you're traveling with that has five and they've got a kiddo that's, or a young adult maybe that's small enough to be on that fifth sleeper option, that's a great room to use. Coronado has typically standard rooms, but they do have small suites that will sleep up to six people as well. And then the Port Orleans French Quarter has standard rooms, but Riverside also has those fifth sleeper rooms as well. So, again, a couple different options there um, in comparison to the value resorts, and just a little bit more floor space when it comes to those rooms. Something to keep in mind with these resorts is if you have mobility concerns, there are several buildings in these resorts that do not have elevators. So, Riverside, at Port Orleans Riverside, the Alligator Bayou section does not have elevators because they're only two-story buildings. So, two-story buildings at Disney resorts will not have elevators. So keep that in mind. The same goes for the all of the Caribbean beach rooms. They do not have elevators in those buildings. So maybe steer clear of that if you know that you've got people who have those mobility concerns. You can request ground floor. Again, requests are great. They may or may not always be accommodated depending on what's happening at the resort at the time. So keep that in mind if you've got grandparents that or just other people with mobility concerns that are traveling with you. Maybe steer clear of Riverside and Caribbean Beach if you're looking in the moderate category for your stay. These resorts also, generally speaking, have a larger footprint when it comes to navigating across the grounds. So, getting from your room to the main building may be a little bit further on some of these, especially like Caribbean Beach is a very large resort for a while, and it may still be, but it was the biggest resort um, at Disney. So, keep those things in mind as well when it comes to mobility. Let's talk briefly about deluxe. Deluxe resorts have so many different options. So again, if you're looking at these, peruse the Disney website, contact a travel agent, see what makes the most sense for your group and kind of the makeup of your group. But Saratoga Springs, Old Key West, Animal Kingdom Lodge, Wilderness Lodge villas and cabins, the Contemporary, Grand Floridian, Polynesian, Boardwalk, Riviera, Yacht Club, Beach Club, and the Swan and Dolphin, which are Marriott owned and operated, but still count as a deluxe resort. Those are all in the deluxe category for Disney World. They have much more space and, like I mentioned, way more room configurations. Options for rooms here in these resorts can sleep anywhere from 2 to 12, depending on budget, configuration, which resort you're at, those types of things. These resorts do have elevators in all of their buildings, so mobility needs will be met with those. Um, these are also your most expensive, right? They have the most amenities, but they are the most expensive. So doing something like renting DVC points can be extremely helpful if you are looking to save a little bit of money and get some of these bigger suites or villas for your larger party that's traveling. This is going to be where you're going to have to stay if you want to be able to all stay together. So if you've got 8, 10, 11, 12 people that you're traveling with, the only options for you all to be centrally located in one room or one space is going to be in this deluxe category. So keep that in mind. That may help you decide whether you want to opt for like 2 or 3 smaller rooms versus one bigger villa or studio or whatever it may be. So different things that you can consider with those. If you plan to rent DVC, you can get a pretty good discount on a lot of these, especially if your dates are flexible and you know quite a bit in advance that you want to book and what resort you want to book. Places like DVC Shop Rentals, David's Vacation Club Rentals, lots of different DVC options where you can look into renting and what that kind of entails. So that's kind of Disney World, a quick rundown. I'm going to do just an even quicker rundown with Disneyland. Um, as we've talked about on here before, Disneyland does not have the resort area that Disney World does. So all of the Disneyland affiliated hotels that are run by Disney are at the deluxe level. So that's the Disneyland Hotel, the Grand Californian, and the Paradise Pier Hotel. Those are all your deluxe level options there. They are going to be the closest. Some of them have separate entrances to the park, lots of different things to consider when it comes to that, but they are going to be that higher price point. If you're looking for something more in the value or moderate level at Disneyland, um, again, these are not Disney owned or operated, but they are what they call good neighbor hotels. So, like, a lot of them are, they have that relationship with Disney, even though they're not Disney owned and run and operated. The Howard, excuse me, sorry, the Howard Johnson, the Courtyard by Marriott theme park entrance, the Parkview Inn, and the Candy Cane Inn are all some options for some good value and moderate priced out options at Disneyland. Okay, so we've talked about how to get to the parks. We've talked about some ideas on where to stay or what to consider when you're staying. But let's talk about the actual parks and what it's going to be like visiting the parks with this many people. Um, a couple general thoughts that I kind of had as I was thinking through, because I am planning a trip right now for 10. There are some things that I have to do differently than when it's just my family or maybe my family and a friend or two. So just a couple thoughts about visiting the parks with your family. If you are someone who has done Disney or really likes to plan for your trips, my biggest suggestion is to be very clear and also very transparent about your hopes and wishes for the trip, for that day, for that park. But also, you have to leave room to be flexible. Um, Stopping every 30 to 60 minutes to kind of assess your group's needs can be really helpful as well, and trying to anticipate the need for maybe a snack or a break to help kind of alleviate any tension that you may have. Even if you're going with mostly adults, I still feel like you need to stop every 30 to 60 minutes to kind of like do a quick check-in. Like, how are our feet feeling? How are our bellies feeling? How are our heads feeling? What do we need? Those types of things. We always talk about on these episodes how many days. And again, it really depends on the makeup of your group, and it really depends on your budget. On our upcoming trip, my family is staying the longest out of all of ours. So we're all arriving together, and then we'll have different days that we're leaving because that's what made sense for our family. So that way we can make the most of our time together. So, if you're going to do, I suggest with Disney World doing at least 3 to 4 days minimum, just to make sure that you can at least get to the highlights of everything. You're not going to be able to travel as quickly through things with this bigger group, or you're going to have to do some like dividing and conquering and coming back together. So, giving yourself some extra time in the parks in comparison to what maybe you would need with a smaller family is definitely going to be something you're going to have to take into account. Um, and park hoppers are a really great option, again, if you're able to do them in your budget, especially with a group of this size, especially if you've got a wide age range. Um, Having the ability to be able to do that can be immensely helpful. And I just saw a really good question from Zach in our chat here that asked, how do lightning lanes work with big groups? And that is a really great question that I was just going to talk about. So thank you for that perfect segue, Zach. With your lightning lanes and with any sort of planning that you do on your app, you can book up to 12 people. That is the limit set by Disney, and that is just booking through one account. So I do suggest if you've got a group bigger than like 10, I would have maybe 2 different accounts that you're booking through to help you be able to kind of divide that out. And it's also gonna help you be able to select maybe more age appropriate rides for the younger kids versus older teenagers. And that's all completely customizable. And I do plan on doing some more episodes on lightning lanes. And so I can hit some more information about kind of advice for doing bigger groups. But it is definitely possible and it is something that you can definitely do. But just do keep in mind that they do cap that at 12. Um, and as far as like a VIP or something like that being a better option for bigger groups, it really depends on the ages of your group and your budget. Disney has VIP tours. Disney has that Premier Pass that kind of gives you that access. Both of those are decent options if your budget allows. Typically, from what I've seen, a VIP tour is going to be a better, more cost effective option than the Premier Pass. But the Premier Pass gives you all of the rides, where with your VIP, you may or may not have time depending on your how much time you pay for your VIP tour, if that makes sense. Um, and as far as return times changing for group sizes, yes, they can. So if you're able to split down into two smaller groups, or if you're able to kind of manipulate your plans that way, you're going to have a higher chance of availability with a smaller group. It's just the way their system is set up. Um, so finding times for a really popular ride for 10 is a lot harder than finding times for a really popular ride for 4, if that makes sense. So, all things to consider. And again, I'm going to do more lightning lane talks cuz that is kind of my bread and butter. That is my specialty when it comes to Disney. So, we'll talk more about that in the future, but those are kind of my overlying suggestions when it comes to lightning lanes. Um, so let's talk about kind of a schedule and what my suggestions are for what that could look like in your bigger group. I suggest maybe, and again, this is all dependent on your group and the ages and who you're traveling with and do they like Disney and what IP are they interested in and what kind of rides do they want to do? So many different variables. But I would suggest if you're able to plan your mornings till about lunchtime together. So kind of get everybody moving together if you're able to, depending on your teenagers, if you've got teenagers that don't want to get up in the morning or do want to get up in the morning. Um, and then after lunch, you can break off into groups to people can do their own thing. People can go do more rides. Little ones can go back and do a nap. Other people can go back and swim at the pool. Lots of different options, but that would be something that I would suggest. And then from there, you could maybe plan to meet up for dinner again. So afternoons are kind of just like, hey, everybody, here are your options. Do A, B, or C depending on what you want to do for the day. Um, and then go from there. Also, this is just my suggestion. Um, Planning maybe one group photo opportunity every day, sometime in that morning time span, is also a great compromise. If you've got people that don't enjoy photos, but you can go into it saying, like, hey, here is our one family obligation photo that we're all going to take together for this day or for this park or however you want to divide it out, depending. Um, and again, like I talked about from the very beginning, being clear, but being flexible, to understand that everybody's expectations are that you're all kind of on the same page, right? But then, yes, also understanding that giving multiple opportunities to experience things like fireworks, nighttime shows, different rides can be beneficial for a group, especially if you're not sure how the kids or the grown-ups in your group may or may not do with being in the parks. There is something so unique about experiencing a theme park like Disney that you may need more breaks than you think. You may not need as many breaks as you think. So, giving yourself, and again, we talked about park hoppers being immensely helpful, but giving yourself multiple opportunities to experience different things in the parks on multiple days can be a really big benefit for a group of this size. And again, like I said, meeting up for a table service dinner can be a great way to kind of reconnect with everyone. Let's say 11 o'clock comes and you're done with your morning stuff and you all kind of go your separate ways. Well, coming back together for 5 or 6 o'clock meal um, can be a fun way to kind of reconnect and see what everybody did for the day and make your plans going forward from there. Let's talk about rest days. I will still continually always advocate for a pattern of 2 days in the park, one rest day. And that is regardless of age. That could be for infants, that can be for teenagers, adults, grandparents, all ages. I really truly think that doing more than two full park days in a row is just not worth it. By the time you get to that third day, you are exhausted. You are no longer enjoying yourself. You are no longer having fun. So being able to do kind of a 2 day on, 1 day off schedule pattern, I think is extremely helpful. Um, so the big question about these parks is, what are the best rides for everyone to be able to enjoy together, right? We talked about scheduling some time in the mornings to be able to enjoy your time together. So, what kind of rides should you do? Well, let's talk about it. So, the majority of the rides on this list are going to be the ones that we've talked about that are great for infants. Um, that's just the way it is, right? These are rides that anybody can do. Let's talk a little bit about each park. I'm going to kind of list off some rides and give just a brief description and some input, and then move on because it's a fairly lengthy list at some of these parks. So, if we're talking about Magic Kingdom, things like Buzz Lightyear, Dumbo, Small World, Jungle Cruise, Magic Carpets, Winnie the Pooh, Peter Pan, The Carousel, The People Mover, Little Mermaid, The Railroad, but then also things like Country Bears, Tiki Room, and PhilharMagic. The only thing to consider with PhilharMagic is there are 3D glasses involved with that. So, depending on your age and makeup of your group, you may or may not decide to do that. If you're going to Epcot, things at Epcot that are good for all to do together. Three Caballeros, Figment, Living with the Land, The Seas with Nemo, and Spaceship Earth. There are also lots of shows and performances across World Showcase. There's the Journey of Water walkthrough with Moana and the Turtle Talk show. So all of those things are really great options for your mandatory family fun time all together. If you are at Epcot. Hollywood Studios, unfortunately, has significantly less to do together as a group. But you've got Runaway Railway kind of was a question mark on my list. It's it's a great ride. It has some loud elements and it has the one element where it feels like you're kind of going over the waterfall, which may or may not be okay for some of your younger kiddos that are with you. So keep that in mind. Toy Story Mania is an option there, but again, that one does have glasses for the 3D element. So decide whether or not you think your kiddos will be able to do that you're traveling with. Same for Muppet Vision 3D for now. It will be closing in the future for the Monsters Inc. area to go in. But for now, that is an option. And then the Vacation Fun Shorts area as well. So again, not a ton that are great for all ages. Now, there are a couple um, other shows, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So hang tight for that because I'm going to talk about shows all together in just a minute. Animal Kingdom, Tough to Be a Bug. Again, that's a for now. That can be a little scary for kids too, so you may want to screen that one before you go in. And that one will be closing in the next year or so to make room for the new Zootopia show. The Safari is a great option, and Navi River Journey, also the Wilderness Express train, and the walking trails at Animal Kingdom are great for all ages. If we hop over to California, looking at Disneyland, Disneyland has a ton for all ages to be able to do together. So at Disneyland, Alice, the Casey Jr. Circus Train, the Railroad, Dumbo, Small World, again, Runaway Railway, maybe or maybe not, depending on your group. Peter Pan, Snow White, Winnie the Pooh, Mr. Toad, Pinocchio, the Storybook Land canal boats, the carousel, the Finding Nemo submarines. They can be a little claustrophobic, so keep that in mind. Jungle Cruise and the Mark Twain and the Columbia sailing ship are options there. So again, tons of options at Disneyland. DCA has less, but there's still quite a few. The Golden Zephyr, the Inside Out Emotional Whirlwind, Jesse's Critter Carousel, Little Mermaid, Monsters Inc., the non-swinging, let me repeat that, the non-swinging Pixar Pal Round, Turtle Talk with Crush, Mickey's PhilharMagic. Again, the glasses, maybe not with that one because it is the same 3D as Magic Kingdom. And then the red car trolley for now until it closes at Disneyland. Character meet and greets at all parks are a really fun way to make some memories together with your family. So definitely look at those. And maybe that's your one family photo for the day. You know, when you go to Magic Kingdom, maybe you decide that you're all going to meet Mickey together and that's your photo for the day. So something to keep in mind. Let's talk about shows because there are some really great options for shows. Shows can be a great way to rest legs and spend time together. So, some options that I highly suggest for all ages at the parks. At Disney World, the Castle Stage Show at Magic Kingdom, although it is a standing room show, so keep that in mind. And it can be hot standing out there, but I think it's a great show for all ages. If you can catch the Main Street Philharmonic, they're a great show. Also at Magic Kingdom as well. At Hollywood Studios, the Frozen Sing-Along is a great show for all ages. I would tentatively also put the Beauty and the Beast show on there as well, depending on your ages for that one. Um, at Animal Kingdom, Festival of the Lion King, and the Finding Nemo musical are both awesome options for all ages. Those theaters are easy to get in and out of. They're super captivating. So those are great options for shows. And then at Epcot, I already talked about there's tons of live performances and things happening all across that park. So lots of great options there as well. At Disneyland, any of the Avengers shows in Avengers Campus are good for all ages, and the Disneyland Band would be another great option there for different shows that you can catch. Now, some of those are sitting. I talked about, they're a great way to rest your legs. So some of them are sitting, some of them are not. So kind of scope it out, see what makes sense. Do some research, find a YouTube video that can help you figure out what the setup is for all of those. As far as parades go, kind of in that same show category, parades are great if you've got littles that can sit in a stroller and watch. They may not be great for older family members to have to stand and wait, depending on if it's an afternoon parade, if it's going to be, we've got the new evening nighttime parade coming to Magic Kingdom this summer. So keep that in mind. Unfortunately, the parade times at Magic Kingdom are not typically great when it comes to a group that maybe needs a nap in the afternoon. They typically do a noon and a 3. There's sometimes a 2 o'clock. So again, that may be one of those things where you give yourself multiple days to try and catch it, depending on your kiddos and their temperament for the day. But some parades that are great, again, the Magic Kingdom has the Festival of Fantasy Parade, which is the one I was just mentioning, and then the new nighttime parade coming to Magic Kingdom in the summer of 2025. That unfortunately is the only true parade that Disney World has right now. So if you are a parade person, that's your chance. Over at Disneyland, they typically have a parade in Disneyland as well. It's usually either their seasonal parade if they do like their Christmas time, or it has been Magic Happens. There's currently not a parade operating at this moment of me recording this podcast, but my guess is that Magic Happens will come back, or Disneyland is getting ready to celebrate its 70th anniversary. So there may be some specialty things coming that way in the future as well. Kind of hand in hand with parades and shows are fireworks and nighttime shows. So looking at kind of what's where and what may be good for all ages. At Magic Kingdom, they have the Happily Ever After fireworks show. Those are typically anywhere between 8 and 9 o'clock at night. Lots of different places you can see that from, so if you're not someone who wants to see the front of the castle, maybe look around for some other options or do some research on that. Epcot has Luminous. Luminous is typically at 9 o'clock, right at park close for Epcot. I really enjoy Luminous. I think it's a good one for all ages because there are so many good vantage points that you can see it, that you don't feel as claustrophobic as maybe you do, on Main Street trying to watch Happily Ever After. So if you've got lots of strollers or you've got ECVs that you're traveling with, Luminous can be a really good one for that. Just a little bit easier to navigate, finding a spot to see and not feeling kind of like there's people surrounding you on all sides. For Hollywood Studios, they do have some small kind of projection and fireworks shows at the Chinese theater that run. Um, Again, that's one where, like, everyone's kind of crowded around. It's not nearly as popular as Fantasmic. Fantasmic is their big nighttime show that they do, but I really enjoy the projection shows and the little fireworks that they have on, the Chinese theater as well. Fantasmic is a wonderful show. It does have some scary elements, so if you've got little kiddos that maybe don't enjoy Disney villains, that's something you may want to screen before you go. There's also some fire pyrotechnic elements to that one as well. So again, just keep that in mind. But it is great because there is seating, and there is plenty of seating. So as long as you get there early, it is a really great show, to be able to go and sit and enjoy all together. But definitely screen that one if you've got little kids that maybe uh, might get spooked kind of easily. That does sometimes have 2 showtimes. It is typically if it does 2 showtimes, it's typically like an 8 o'clock and a 9:30, but sometimes it's just 1 showtime at 9 or 9:30, so keep that in mind as well. Unfortunately, Animal Kingdom does not have an evening show. They do sometimes have projections on the Tree of Life if the park is open past sunset for it to be dark enough. It's not something they typically advertise a lot, and they do close significantly earlier than a lot of the other parks, usually around 5, 6, 7 o'clock. So depending on the time of year, would depend on whether or not they're running those projections on the Tree of Life. But I wouldn't necessarily consider that an evening show. It's just kind of one of those things that you can enjoy as you're leaving the park for the evening. Over at Disneyland, they have a couple options. So inside Disneyland, they do have Fantasmic. Their Fantasmic is different. You've heard us say this before, but in case you didn't know, their Fantasmic is different than Hollywood Studios. So it is a different feel, a different setup. It is standing room there. There are not seats, and it is uh, very prime real estate to stand and be able to see and have a good view for Fantasmic, so keep that in mind. Um, they do also have their, fireworks and projection shows. So the thing about Disneyland fireworks do not run every night, for various different reasons that you've heard us talk about here before, but it can be because of they have an agreement with the city of Anaheim to only run them on certain nights because of school schedules, because they are so close to residential areas. Um, the other issues that they will run into are the high altitude winds out there that will prevent them from being able to have those fireworks. So don't count on always seeing fireworks when you're there. Consider it a lucky blessing if you do get to see them, but they do still run the projection shows. So they run those at the castle. They also run those at Small World. So a couple different options of where you can see the projection show over there. And then if you're in DCA and you want to see their nighttime show is World of Color. That is a great one to be able to go see. You can there is a virtual queue for that you can get kind of a specific standing area for World of Color. So if you are going to be visiting Disneyland and wondering about that, check your Disneyland app for that virtual queue. I believe it is a noon drop for that one that you can enter to get selected to have those kind of better viewing areas, and it's a free virtual queue. So those are kind of your nighttime show options. Now, the thing about nighttime shows is It's one of those things where you may need a couple different nights of options to see them, because you may try to see it on one night and the kiddos are just not hanging, and you have to pivot and abort and try again another night. Um, if you're somewhere in Disneyland and you're trying to see fireworks and they're supposed to have fireworks, you may want to give yourself a couple nights to see those fireworks. Um, because you never know what could happen with the weather, and weather goes for Florida as well, right? The weather in Florida can be unpredictable. Um, there will be elements of things that maybe don't happen in the fireworks show if the weather is bad. Certain aspects of the show will get canceled, or the shows altogether could get canceled. So if the nighttime shows are a really big deal to you, I would give yourself plenty of opportunities to be able to experience them, so that way you get to check that off of your list for your trip. Um, just a couple other thoughts to kind of wrap this up here. The main thing that I have found already in planning this trip with my extended family is this idea of, and I wrote down, include your family in planning or don't. You know which is best. So you're going to know whether, if you're the planner, you're going to know, like, yep, I got this. I'm just going to plan it all and tell everybody what to do. And that's what's going to work best for our group. Or, no, I really want this to be a joint planning effort. I'm going to include my parents and my siblings in this, and we can all do it together. Lots of different options for your particular family makeup. So keep that in mind and just roll with what's best, right? Um, if you are the driving force behind your Disney trip, don't unfortunately, don't expect everyone to love it as much as you do. You want to give them the best opportunity to have a great and memorable experience. And that may mean some sacrifices from everybody. That may mean some give and take and some compromises. And that may mean that the people in your group don't like your favorite ride as much as you do. Or the people in your group don't really care to stay and watch Fantasmic, and they'd rather go try to get on one last ride instead. There's lots of different ways to experience Disney. And in a group this size, it's so important to remember that. To remember that everyone has different opinions. Everyone is going to enjoy the parks in a different way. And that's okay. And that's part of the being flexible with groups this large. Um, Trying to find one thing for each person that they'll enjoy when it comes to your planning process can be really helpful too. If you've got an uncle you're traveling with who you think he'll like Cosmic Rewind and Rise of the Resistance the best, because those are the IPs that he's interested in, Marvel and Star Wars, great. Get him those single passes or the virtual queue for Cosmic, or give him a couple opportunities to experience those attractions. If you've got little kids who are gonna love Dumbo or Little Mermaid or Winnie the Pooh, give them several options and several opportunities to go back and do those rides again. Finding that one thing for each person can really make a huge difference on your family trip. And leaving time in your schedule to do those re-rides or to go back to certain parks. There's something to be said for having a few flexible park days, especially if you've got park hoppers. Now that most tickets at Disney World don't need reservations. Now, this is different at Disneyland. Luckily, Disneyland park hopping is a lot less of a planned experience. You can just kind of go with the flow on that one. But at Disney World, leaving yourself kind of some open-ended time of, well, we're just going to take a survey and see who wants to go to which park. And maybe you divide up for a few hours on your fourth or fifth day in the parks, so that way people can go do what they want to do. That it's worth sacrificing, forcing everybody to stay together to allow people to have those extra re-rides and extra time in the parks that they want to do and that they want to experience, right? And again, I talked about leaving multiple nights to catch nighttime shows or certain rides can be a really good idea, especially if you've got littles or you've got maybe older family members that are traveling with you, giving them lots of opportunities to experience those things. Um, and the last thing that I'll just kind of leave you with is just making sure that you're enjoying your time together. It's such a big to do, right? To plan a Disney trip with a group this size. But I will just remind you that there's something to be said for not being in a hurry, taking your time, enjoying the small moments, whether that's sitting on the hub grass because your littles have been in the stroller too long and they need to crawl around for a little bit, or it's grabbing an extra Mickey ice cream bar because you know that, your cousin needs one and you want one too, or, there's so many different countless ways to have those little magic memories and moments on your trip. Don't rush past them. It can be so easy to look at our list and go, okay, we have A, B, C, D to get to. Let's go, go, go and get it all done. There's a time and place for that, but there's also a time and place to just enjoy the moments together, sit and listen to the music, walk by a character, do some people watching, whatever your group may want or need in the moment. I think there's something so special and so important about remembering to just stop and enjoy the time together. So, traveling with a group this size can be so difficult, extremely difficult, but it can also be extremely rewarding and it can be, one of those memories that will last a lifetime, especially if you've got people where it may be their only time that they go to Disney. You want to make those memories for everybody. So, all that being said, I do briefly just want to talk about what is to come for our upcoming Mom Street plans. Like I mentioned in previous episodes, and we've talked about, we are going to be doing kind of a rotating schedule. So, between my solo episodes like this one and including our co hosts. So, for our next week episode, will be the official premiere of Duck and Jess as some of my wonderful rotating co hosts. So, their first official podcast episode will be our next episode next week. And then from there, we'll kind of hop back and forth between solo episodes and our hub episodes. Again, our hub episodes are referring to those ones where we have those extra co hosts with us as well. So, thank you guys all so much for joining me for this first solo exciting episode of Mom Street USA. As always, you can um, feel free to reach out to me, to us. We are at Mom Street USA on all of our social media channels. You can always reach out to us via email, momstreetusa@gmail.com. And again, we do have a channel on our good friend Kirk at Walrus Carp on his Pocket Fam Walrus Carp Discord. You can find our Mom Street USA channel on there as well. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we will catch you next time on Mom Street USA. Bye, everyone.